Welcome, Trojans and college football fans. Recently, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Phil Steele to discuss his magazine as well as the 2023 Trojans. I split this interview up into two videos. In this first video, there's two parts. The first part, we talk about Phil and how he got his magazine started, as well as what goes into making each one of his editions. Then we transition into talking about the Trojans, talking about his All-America list, which one of the Trojans made that list, as well as which Trojans just missed it. Then we transition into a discussion about dark horses for the Pac-12 championship and who might be in the way of USC getting that last Pac-12 championship. So with no further ado, I hope you guys enjoy the interview. Phil, thank you so much for taking the time and come see us today.
Hey, a real pleasure, Tim. And as we talked off air, you said you've been reading the magazine since 1995, so I can't thank you enough for getting the magazine each and every year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's something. It's just something that's I know that the people that are watching football right now on videos, I know they all know you and they all know what's going on. But so let's go back to 1995 when you first started. Back then, how did it all begin? Just give us an idea of how did this whole process start?
Well, Tim, I would say it was 1993, where what I would do, there's about 20 college football preview magazines on the market, and I would go out and buy all 20 of them, trying to get all the information I could for the upcoming season. And I'd fill out my notebook with everything I read in all 20 magazines. And then when I got done, I probably didn't even have a starting lineup for some teams. And it was really paltry. It was the same information. It repeated over and over in the magazines. They talked about the few star players, and that was about it. So I said, forget all this. I need to find out about what I want to find out about. So I started compiling the rosters from the schools and getting it all put together. And someone walked in the office, I think it was 94, and said, "Hey, Phil, what you got there in front of you, why don't you turn that into a magazine?" So Joe DiPapalo from the Game Plan magazine sort of took me under his wing, got us on the market that first year. And it was different than the other magazines because it just had so much information. But at least you could find the 2 deep or 3 deep for your favorite team, as opposed to hardly even having the starting lineup. And once that first one hit the newsstands, like you said, is in 1995, you get your hands on a copy. You just have to have it every single year. So the first one was black and white. It was on newsprint. We only had 188 pages. Now we're up to 352 pages, full color, and it gets bigger and better every year. And it's by far the best-selling magazine out there.
By the way, you guys, so most of you guys have seen as preview magazine, but if you haven't, each team has about 2 pages. And I still don't understand how you're able to get so much information on 2 pages about each team. And I mean, obviously you break it down by conference as well, but could you just go into, what the process is each year when you get compiling each team? What's the process that's involved?
Yeah, Tim, it's a 7-month process, and we actually start the Sunday after Thanksgiving. And that's when some team seasons are complete. Now, I've got a setup where I got 12 TVs in front of me. So during the college football season, I'm watching 12 games all day long on Saturday. The rest of the week, I'm watching tape, or getting all the latest articles, keeping up to date with all 133 teams. But in the write-through process, I like to just focus on one team for 5-6 hours. And so what we do is we capture all the articles that were written about every team during the course of the year. I read through it. It takes you through the ebbs and flows of each position. And then we write the first write-through, which is what kind of shape was this position coming into the year? What happened? What kind of shape are they heading into next year? The second write-through process happens pre-spring when we get the rosters from the schools. We've captured all the transfers, all the freshmen that have signed. Those are added to the write-ups and put in there. And then the third is the part I like the best, which is talking to the head coaches. And this year I talked to 123 of the 133 coaches. In the Pac-12, I talked to 11 of the 12 head coaches. The only one I didn't talk to was Deion Sanders. And, of course, Deion Sanders probably didn't have half his roster signed when spring was over this year. So we wouldn't have had a very good conversation as it was. But after that process, we put a 3 or 4 deep for every single team in the projected starting lineups, final up the rosters. And this year, with the transfer portal closing on May 15th, we've actually moved the magazine deadline back to June 7th this year. And I told all the coaches, they all have my cell phone number. I said, you sign somebody June 6th, I want to get them in a magazine. So I'm getting texts, calls June 6th from the coaches. We're adding players to the pages, changing the lineups. It got a lot more hectic those final 3 weeks, but I like to feel we've captured about 95% of the transfer portal signings. Naturally, we captured all the folks hitting the portal, which happened to close on May 15th, but the 3 weeks we gave it allowed us to capture all the signees.
Yeah, especially with USC, absolutely up to date. Deuce Robinson was a late addition, bringing in a lot of the portal guys. That must be a headache for you, but you do a great job because the 2 pages on USC are complete and really enjoyed reading them. Speaking of USC, so you've in '95, we had Keyshawn Johnson and John Robinson making a run at the Rose Bowl and Northwestern. But over the years, even before that, I'm sure you were following USC football. If you had to take a look, just in your opinion, where is USC on the landscape of college football? What is the importance of USC on the macro level?
I think it's getting more and more better than what it had been the previous 5-6 years. What we're looking at with USC now, I mean, they just landed a Heisman Trophy winner. After 4 really mediocre years, they bounced back with a nice 11-3, my number 1 most improved team last year. So thank you, USC, for delivering big time for me in that respect. And I think right now, joining the Big Ten, we're starting to see USC regain the glamour that they had. Growing up here in Ohio, the Rose Bowl was always the big thing. And it seemed like USC was in the Rose Bowl every year when I was a child and playing the Big Ten school. So it's good to see USC back on that level again.
Well, speaking of being on that level, you do have, going into the season, you have a number of Trojans as honorees. You have obviously Caleb Williams as your offensive player of the year, 3rd team All-American wide receiver Taj Washington, 4th team All-American center Justin Dedich, and 1st team All-American safety in Kalen Bullock. Is there somebody that possibly just missed that list on the Trojans roster, or possibly someone that you can see is not there now in a preseason, but might show up somewhere on a postseason All-American award?
Yeah, well, naturally, Mario Williams is a guy who everybody's going to look at. He was one of the most highly rated guys coming out of high school, and now he's in his 2nd full year here at USC. A player like Jonah Monheim and the offensive line, I think he's a legitimate All-American candidate. He's the starting right tackle for the last 2 years, and I think he's an NFL caliber right tackle at that. I'm really interested to watch Bear Alexander this year. He brings a big body to the middle, 315 pounds from Georgia. He may just have that type of impact on this team. And if the run defense greatly improves and he can get after the quarterback a little bit, then we'll see him on some of the All-American lists. And then even a Mason Cobb, who comes over from Oklahoma State. He was one of their top tacklers last year. And I think he's going to play a lot of snaps this season and have a big impact. So all those players can. Now, for USC, the key to getting All-Americans on the defense is going to be playing better defense, and I do anticipate that this year.
Yeah, well, you're happy to know that your faith. Josh Henson also has the same faith in Jonah Monheim as you. He's actually been rumored to move over left side to protect Caleb's backside as far as tackles concerned. Now, you brought up the linebackers. Last year, that was a concern for USC. Thin, obviously injury issues with Gentry, but you have them as the number 9 position group nationally. And you just talked about Cobb, a healthy Gentry, Lee, and Tackett Curtis. Are there any other really strengths, would you say, if USC is going to take this to the next level, what other position groups do you see sticking out for USC?
Well, naturally, the skill players on offense. I mean, it starts with the Heisman winner, the quarterback, which, of course, I rate the number 1 unit out there. The running back core has me excited. Despite losing a guy like Travis Dye, the Austin Jones could be in for a big year. He transferred in last year. Or Austin Jones, I should say, was my number 6 rated running back out of high school. They've got Marshawn Lloyd, who led South Carolina in rushing last year, 2 big-time freshmen coming in Joyner and Miller. So I think the running back core, which I rate number 9, has that opportunity. And naturally, wide receiver. When you're dealing with Caleb Williams, not only have Taj Washington, not only Mario Williams, but they add in the Pac-12's leading receiver from last year from Arizona and Dorian Singer. They've got Brendan Rice. They add in a big-time recruit at tight end and Deuce Robinson. So this is a loaded receiving core as well.
Who do you see? So as far as in the Pac-12, so we know the Big Four, right? With USC, Washington, Oregon, going to be really pushing with Utah in order to go. Do you see a surprise team that's going to give USC trouble in the Pac-12?
Yeah, I think a team that has a chance of actually getting to the Pac-12 title game that nobody's really talking about is Oregon State, and there's a couple of reasons for that. I've gone over the team with Coach Smith since day one. I remember my call this year. It seems like every year I talk to him about that first year when he had the team, and I'm like, as my recollection is you had a bunch of maybe one deep on the team. You had walk-ons on your second string. And I go, now look at you. And then I just had to pause and I go, let me go back and look at my book and make sure my memory's clear on that. And sure enough, it is. That's Oregon State had about a one deep his first year there. He's really built this team. They're deep. Last year they got average quarterback play. Now they bring in DJ Uiagalelei. Even if Gulbranson plays, he'll be much improved over last year. They've got Martinez and Fenwick at running back. I really like the offensive line and the defense. And then what you have to love about Oregon State's the schedule. I went back and looked last year in the Pac-12. I believe the Big Six from the Pac-12, which include Oregon State and UCLA among the four teams that you mentioned, were something like 30-2 against the bottom six in the Pac-12. So you have to assume that they're the premier teams in the league. And then when they played at home, those teams are all dynamite. And Oregon State's a team that's actually 12-1 at home the last 2 years. And their only loss was to USC, as you recall, a very tight game that they could easily have won. So this is an Oregon State team that does its best work at home. They've been playing in a rebuilding stadium the last 2 years. Now it's fully complete. They'll have full capacity. And most of their tough games are at home. They get Utah at home. They get UCLA at home. They get Washington at home. They only have one road game against one of the Big Six teams from the Pac-12, and that's at Oregon, the Civil War, the final game of the season. And they get to avoid USC in league play. So I think they've got the schedule tailor-made to actually surprise a lot of folks this year.
Now, you said Big Six. Are you throwing UCLA into, or who's that sixth team you're talking about
Yeah,
then?
UCLA would be the sixth team. If you go back and look at last year, they were a team that they only had one loss to one of the bottom six teams. They beat Washington last year. They beat Utah last year. And I think with Chip Kelly, while they lose their quarterback, Dante Moore, I think expect him to win the job. They bring in Carson Steele from Ball State. And I like the way he's building this squad. They got 16 returning starters. They're a more experienced team than last year. One of the reasons I don't have them higher, they have to play Utah on the road, USC on the road, and Oregon State all on the road. But I think talent-wise, they're up there with the other ones at the top six in the Pac-12.
Yeah, definitely Chip Kelly, 8-4, 9-4. He's definitely building some momentum. I hope you all enjoyed the first half of the interview. In the second half of the interview, Phil and I discuss Utah, Washington, and Oregon, their players, and how they may get in the way of USC getting that last Pac-12 championship. The best way for you to know when the second half video drops is to go ahead and subscribe to the channel and make sure you hit that notification bell. That way you'll know when we put out part 2 of the Phil Steele interview. Again, we look forward to bringing you guys quality interviews going forward. And as always, you guys, fight on.